yeah, we're still in the moment. You know, I think for certain people, BLM is something that happened in the past. We're supposedly in this post-BLM world, but for me, I live this every day. I was there. I know how I felt. I know how I feel, and I know the amount of work, not just from me, but from everyone involved in the movement that got us to the point that we got now. So yeah, crazy thing. Hi KLAT, this is Ogun, and this is my Get to Know Me with KLAT. I think Ogun is a powerful name. So I'm a half Nigerian man. My mum's side of the family is Nigerian, and Ogun is a god, god of iron and steel works, and one of the most powerful gods actually in native Nigerian culture, and the one that's called the person that opens the way. So I think Nigerians, we're a spiritual people, innit? So all these things matter. There's this strength in the name, and I think having such a strong name, and it's, you know, my actual name that I use as my artist name has been, yeah, I think I try and imbue that sense of strength in my music and in my artistry, and try and carry the flag of my culture every step of the way. So yeah, when I started making music, it was me and my good friend, Anthony. And I think really we started together because we kind of did everything together. So we had a clothing brand. Before I made music, I used to make clothes. So we were making clothes. But the intention was always to make music. It's just we didn't know what the pathway was. I didn't know anything about the musical world. So I found it easier to start my creative journey making clothes, because I could see the path of, okay, how can we actually put our ideas into action and make it happen. Whereas with music, I was like, I don't even know where to start. So he then started making music with a producer called Goom, all from Newport. And then one day he was just like, yo, like come to the studio, come to the session with me and Goom. And we went, and it just clicked. It just clicked. It's one of those things that just clicked, and that's where After Party was born. And you know, we recorded and wrote everything in my boy's attic. And you know, Goom was a multi-instrumentalist. He was a genius, you know, and I think it was really, I'm glad I started making music in that kind of environment where firstly I had someone to push me, and it was that competitive edge, friendly competition, but it was always like me and Anthony both wanted to have the best verse on a song. And I think having someone else next to you really pushes you, you know, as they say, like sword sharpens sword, and I think he was like a sword at that time. And then the reason why we kind of all started going our separate ways in a sense musically, we're all still good friends, is our producer wanted to go more in the electronic music direction, and I think me and Anthony still wanted to keep that essence of hip hop. So I think there was just a natural drift really, and I think, yeah, everybody found different things they were interested in individually and pursued our own musical journeys that way. I think I take inspiration from everywhere. I think when I think back of my journey so far, artists that have influenced me, I definitely think in the early stages, I would say artists like Odd Future, so you know, Ill Sweatshirt, Tyler the Creator, that whole movement, not just musically, but just what they were all doing, and that collective was, I think, a major influence on me, especially in the early stages. I think Kanye is a big influence to me as well. Again, not necessarily just strictly musically, but as a person, in the way he pursues his creative vision, and that kind of sense of world building, and that sense of, yeah, being multidisciplinary. I think I've always appreciated the way he does things. And then I think I get also a lot of inspiration from elsewhere, not necessarily musically. I think Basquiat, I would say, was a big inspiration for me and a big influence in my work. I think Alexander McQueen as a designer really influenced my sense of self and my work as well. And then I think just a lot of different movements and film. I'm big on film as well, so a lot of different films as well that I think influenced me as well. But I would say my main inspiration is probably my mum, it's probably my family. I think that's my major inspiration. I wouldn't say it's a specific artist or anything. In My Own Skin was interesting because it was my first time kind of doing everything by myself. in a weird way. Obviously, as you know, making clothes with someone else, making music with someone else, you have to consider their point of view and their perspective. But In My Own Skin was really interesting because it was the first time I was like, I got this blank canvas here, and it's just me. And what am I going to do with this opportunity? And I think it was really interesting also that phase of my life, moving to a new city. That's when I just went to uni, so I was living in Birmingham and meeting new people and just trying to figure out how am I going to make this happen? How am I going to communicate these ideas in a musical way that introduces people to who I am, but also is good music at the same time. And I was trying to find that balance really. And I think within My Own Skin, I really enjoyed that process because it was so organic, like it was so free flow. I didn't think about things too much. And I tend to be an overthinker. I always say I live in my own head. So In My Own Skin, when I look back now, I was like, actually, I was just trying things out, seeing what worked, seeing what I liked. And there was no pressure. There was no, it was just, because it's the first, there's no pressure. And I miss creating in that way, because I think the more you create, the more pressure starts to creep in and the more you start thinking about things in a different way. There's less of that, just do it attitude, you know? Top 3 song recommendations. All right, without thinking too much, I'll just think of 3 songs I'm listening to a lot at the moment. One is Karma by Sir and Isaiah Rashad. It's quite new, that I've literally had it on repeat since it's come out really. That's a really good song. I really like Sir. Another one is Sampha. What's the name of the song? It's from his new album, Jonathan Siegel. That's one of my favorites on that album. I've been listening to a lot of Sampha. And another one is Thank God For Me on Schoolboy Q's new album, which is, extraordinary. Crazy beat switch, crazy energy from Schoolboy Q, but that's been what's heavily in my rotation at the moment. I think I've been blessed. I've been blessed with an interesting kind of life, in the sense that I think I've managed to experience a lot of things. Obviously, being born in Italy and kind of that dynamic with my family there. Moving to Wales, moving to the UK when I was 5, learning to adapt to a new language, a new culture, a new way of living, and the things that bring you. I think my experiences in terms of my family life, being a carer, I have 2 sisters who have autism and global development delay, and me and my mum have been their carers, so I think that brings its own kind of experiences and perspectives. And then, from that, being a fashion designer, being the artistic things as well as also living in different places. I went to uni in Birmingham, I did a year abroad in Berlin, so I had the opportunity to live in Berlin for a year, which was amazing. I lived in London, I did my masters in London. So I think I've seen enough of the world to have interesting things to say, and I think as an artist, that is your fuel. That's your, for me as an artist, is I need to be engaged in what's going on in my life to have something to talk about. I always say when I go through periods of writer's block, because I get them quite often, I'm like, I just got to go out and live. I got to go and do something, because that is the fuel, that is the inspiration, the catalyst for the work. Without that, if I'm just in my house doing nothing all day, every day, what am I going to rap about? What am I going to write about? So I think those environments have influenced me, because like anything, it widens your worldview. It makes you understand and realize that there is an unimaginable and vast and existential world out there beyond your whatever current environment you're in, especially coming from a small place like Newport. It's easy to get caught into that, little small city life and small city mentality. And I don't say that negatively, like, certain people live how they live, and that's fine. But I think going to other places, experiencing new things, meeting new people, it widens and broadens your perspective. And I think as an artist, for me, the wider my perspective is, the more I have to draw from. You don't want to be insular as an artist. You don't want to just be in a bubble, because it's going to influence your work. Whereas if you have all these various touch points, all these different things, all these different people, all these different conversations, you start to realize, wow, there's a big world beyond everything I know, and I like that. So I think I put all of that in my work in a way. I bring all of that with me anyway to the work. How it manifests, you never really know. really love, like, a common question people always ask musicians, obviously, is always like, how would you describe your music? And it's such a difficult question to answer. And so for me, that kind of framing of somewhere in between Militarian and Zen was like the perfect way to describe my music. And Militarian, I think, obviously that's a term that was coined or at least popularized by J Hus, and I think he's always going on about being a Militarian. But I think that's that sense of identity, that sense of Africanness. I think there's a real link, and I don't think we can separate that link towards being an African person and what that brings. And also that self-confidence, that aggression, that self-confidence, that kind of stand-up mentality, back straight mentality. I think you get a lot of that in my music, but Zen, for me, is like the perfect contrast in terms of Zen being that sense of self and that sense of the inner world and that sense of introspection and that almost kind of, that Buddhist and very spiritual element to the music, to my work, to me, to my identity. And I think everything I release kind of speaks to those two themes. And sometimes you get kind of both within one piece of work, whether that one song that you can really see that sense of what's beneath the surface, but also that sense of me really breaking down how I feel and how I think. And then you get certain songs where I'm just embracing that, I'm standing up and I'm like, no, this is me. You're gonna listen to me and you're gonna hear me and you're gonna feel me. And I think there's an ego attached to that, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think you need both. And so it was almost helpful for myself to frame my own music that way so I can talk about it in a way, because I always used to struggle to answer that question in terms of how would you describe your music. I was like, I don't know, and normally I have an answer for everything, but that Militarian and Zen concept. And I think it really ties into that tension we experience as human beings. And I think every artist, or for me, I'm really understanding that all the great work we've had in our world, all the great work comes from a place of tension. Every single masterpiece, the things that have really moved and are really timeless and have really transcended society and humanity have all come from a place of tension. If there's no tension, that's the thing in the work. And I feel like, I'm learning and understanding how to navigate that tension more and the different ways that tension might manifest. Do I have any hidden talent? I don't know. I'm a pretty good ice skater, which is a weird one. I'm randomly good at ice skating. It's not something I should be good at, I don't think, but I used to go all the time when I was younger. Like there's this organization called Bernardo's that used to take out like young carers, anybody that cared for anybody in their family, they would take them out, kind of give them a break. Shout out to them, they were good. I did a lot of like things I think I otherwise wouldn't have done. Like my mum wasn't going to take me camping. She's like, I got a house at home. Why are we going camping? But camping, ice skating, all this kind of canoeing, all this random stuff. And I became pretty good at ice skating. So anyone want to see me on the ice, you know where to find me. Wow, BLM, it's always fascinating for me to reflect on BLM, just because I still feel like now, even 2-3 years on, that I still haven't really fully processed that whole period of my life. And kind of talking about it is almost like processing it live here right now, every time I have a conversation about it. But BLM just came out of, I've been kind of, throughout my life, I've not really been politically engaged. That's not to say I've been ignorant, I'm not ignorant. I've always been politically aware, but awareness and engagement is not the same thing. I always felt disillusioned by kind of mainstream politics and political movements, and I never felt myself represented. I never felt like there was transparency or honesty within that realm of life. I think politics is smoke and mirrors, same way the corporate world works. And for me, BLM was, I think it was the circumstance of, I had just come back home. So at that period of BLM, I wasn't actually, circumstances is what brought me back to Wales. Basically, my master's moved to either being in person, to being hybrid, so you can either stay and do it in person, or you could go online. And I was living in London, paying crazy amount of money on rent, thinking, what's the point in being here if I don't have to be here? So I was like, cool, let me go back to Wales. So I moved back And it was, around that period then that the situation with George Floyd happened. And I'll be real, what happened was the whole steps of that whole thing was, the George Floyd thing was happening, and at that time I was off social media. I was kind of taking a social media break, but obviously I was seeing everything in the news, speaking to my mum and family, etc. And it really got to me. It really got to me. It got to me in a way that I don't think many things have got to me before. And I remember at the time I was also reading Malcolm X's autobiography, so I think again those kind of moments were linked in a sense. And I remember I kind of broke my social media break and I went on Twitter and I said my piece and I put my phone down, and I just felt hollow. I felt fake. I felt like I feel so strongly about this, and I've had such a visceral reaction to this, and it's such a painful experience, and is that the extent of my passion that I just say a tweet and put my phone down and just carry on eating my dinner? Like, I felt a real, almost kind of dystopian feeling of this is going on there and I'm just here. Like, what's like, what can I do? What's going on? And I remember I really struggled, and what ended up happening then was kind of that day I saw that people in Cardiff were planning and organising. And I was like, okay, it's good to see that something is happening in Wales, but I could see, I'm like, oh, that's in Cardiff, I'm in Newport. I'm like, who's gonna do this here? Like, who's gonna organise? So I remember that night I went to bed and I'm tossing and turning, I couldn't sleep. And I didn't know how I was gonna do it, I didn't know what, but I just knew in that moment, I was like, I have to do something. Like, whatever that is, I don't know, but I have to do something. And so the next day, I remember I called a great friend, a mentor of mine. His name's Fez, works with Urban Circle, and I rang him, and I rang him because I knew he had experience campaigning, and I knew he's a wise person, so I knew he would have told me the situation properly. And he was like, listen, you got to know what you step into if you put your head above the water for this. He was like, don't galvanize people and then leave them hanging. It's not just about getting people on the road and protesting. What's the next stages? What's the change we need to see in Wales? How are we going to turn this into real, genuine change? And I said, cool, that's all I needed to hear. Got off the phone to him, literally straight away went on Facebook, went, listen, we're organising a march here in Newport. It was for the following week. My next phone call then was to the police. I was like, look, this is what we're planning. Obviously this was peak pandemic, so this was in the middle of COVID, and I rang the police. I said, this is what I'm planning. I'm not bringing you to negotiate, I'm bringing you to let you know that this is what's going on, so you can't say you've been blindsided. Cool. And then, yeah, man, within a week, we had organised and we had a protest. Over 2,000 people came to the march. More joined online. Officially we were, I think, the third biggest protest in the UK, which in Newport, which is just crazy to me to see. And I reconnected with community and with the country. I've always said I've never felt, up until the moment of BLM, I never felt Welsh, or I never embraced the Welshness of my identity. But being in that environment and seeing the way people showed out and seeing the passion and the empathy and the change that eventually came from everything, all that work, really allowed me to understand that Wales is a strong place and is a place that cares. And yeah, the rest is history, as they say. So many, we can go into, probably have another hour conversation about everything about BLM, but from that moment of organising and then helping with the different campaigns, the different justice movements that came up, and then getting the change within the educational system in Wales that happened, to then kind of having national, even international conversations. My work then with Arts Council and the Agent for Change role, and yeah, we're still in the moment. I think for certain people, BLM is something that happened in the past, where supposedly in this post-BLM world, but for me, I live this every day. I was there, I know how I felt, I know how I feel, and I know the amount of work, not just from me, but from everyone involved in the movement, that got us to the point that we got now. So yeah, crazy thing. Oh, the new EP, Trial by Fire, out now. Go run that up so I can buy my mum and sisters a house and start working and retire to Paraguay somewhere and just, be fed grapes. So go stream that, because artists need your support. We need help, especially musicians. But Trial by Fire, interestingly, that was not, I did not intend to make that project at that time the way it was at all. Actually, at the time where Trial by Fire was being made, me and Morari were working on our joint project, so we always intended to do a joint project, and obviously we lived together. So yeah, we were kind of exploring ideas and we, mapping out concepts, and we had some music kind of written and done, which was really interesting. And what ended up happening was, I don't know, I just had this itch to scratch. I always say what happened was, I was in the car with one of my boys, good friend of mine, my right-hand man, shout out him. And he was like, we were just talking about music and talking about my music, and he was like, yeah, I like your music. I'm like, yeah. But he's like, bro, like, I need you to play something I can bump in my whip, man. He was like, I need something like crazy, I want bops. And like, I was like, okay, and for me, I took it as almost like a challenge. I was like, okay, like, I like this as a prompt. Like, can I write with that in mind? Like, let me make something for the homies, something that my boys can bump in the car, windows down, full volume. And yeah, I just started, and it impacted the way I was writing. So I just started writing, and these songs were just coming, and it was away from what me and Morari were working on. So it just that naturally ended up kind of fading, and he went on then to start recording what ended up being The Last Cowboy. I started then writing and recording what ended up being Trial by Fire. But I always had this idea to do a trilogy. I think probably inspired by The Weeknd in some sorts. I've always thought, as I'm getting older and just thinking about things more on art, is I feel like music needs to be treated closer to film, and I think like we need to look at musicians as like directors, and obviously each project as a film, as a separate film. In some films, Tarantino, you can see the loose threads and the themes that are all in all his films, even though the content might be different. Same with like a Christopher Nolan. And I think, why don't we start looking at music more in that way? And for me, I was like, okay, a trilogy is interesting because it almost allows me to tell this kind of journey and keep this kind of same thread, whatever that thread might be, within that project. And I think then I was like, okay, what do I want to say? And for me, this trilogy was really about capturing the different elements of my personality, my identity, my persona, myself. And I was like, okay, let's break it down into like emotions. What do you want to capture emotionally? And Trial by Fire was the aggression, and the second part will be about introspection, the inside, the inner world, and the third will be celebration, a celebration of survival, is how I see it. I've survived, I got here, and yeah, the order wasn't. So Trial by Fire, in my mind, when I was first thinking about it, was actually going to be the second project. I didn't think I was going to start with that one, but the way things panned out, it ended up being the first, which was interesting. And the process was really, again, it feels like it happened really quick. Like some of the songs are quite old, but how I put everything together, I tend to move quick. Once I have the embryo of an idea, it's easy for me to just be like, I can just see how all the pieces fit. It's like a puzzle in my mind, and I can literally see, bam, 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 this is what the cover needs to look like, this is what the music needs to feel like, this is the sound, this is the everything, and I could just piece it together quite quickly. So from when I had the concept and I was writing, and I was like, okay, I'm in this bag. And I think sometimes as an artist, you gotta almost chase that as it comes, because inspiration is fleeting. That when I feel that spark, I know I have to capture it, because it's not gonna be there forever. So yeah, even though it was kind of disappointing to move away from what me and Morari were working on, because that was also sick, that would have been cool. It was like, for whatever reason, this is what's being channeled through me right now. And so that's how I ended up starting to write those songs and putting everything together. And for me, it was interesting. I'm like, okay, we're starting with the Trial by Fire. We're starting with literally, like, if in my mind, like a movie. Like this is like the gladiator, the Colosseum, the person literally being in the middle, fighting with all these people watching, and we start right there. And for me, it's going to be interesting to see, now that I'm already starting the process of the next one, how that all ties in. But I really enjoyed the process of Trial by Fire, and I think for me, this was the most professional I've been with my music, in the sense of the consistency, the visuals, working with proper PR companies and radio, really having like campaigns and a proper rollout. It was my first experience of doing that, and really trying to manage that process and everything that entails. But I think, yeah, the music speaks for itself, and I'm glad it came out Sometimes, and well, most of the time, I don't think ideas ever really come out the way you first envision it. Things always change and you embrace it, and that's fine. But I'm glad Trial by Fire came out as close to my original vision as possible, which for me is a big achievement, because yeah, things change and ebb and flow, but actually I captured the things I really wanted to capture within Trial by Fire. So yeah, hopefully people enjoy that, and it has some of my personal favorite songs on there. And I think you can really see the evolution between that and all my previous work.